Welcome back to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I am Devin.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks for being here, everybody. I have a retrospective question for you.
Retrospective, okay.
I think I'm using that word correctly.
We're about to find out.
We'll see. So where were you a year ago? You can answer that either like mentally, physically, in life, metaphysically, however you want to answer that. Where do you feel like you were a year ago, and how does it compare to now?
Oh, you want me to remember last year?
Well, as to the best of your ability.
Yikes. I'm sorry, this is so specific. Do you want it to like this day or like this time of year, or do you just mean last year in general?
In general, it's fine.
Okay. Last year, I think I was. Last year was interesting because last year I was starting kind of a new career path, and so which was exciting but very kind of different. And this time last year, I was starting a new role within that career path, and so it was kind of a time of like change in that regard. And not to kind of tailor it around career, but I think it's something that often gives me a lot of joy and excitement and purpose. And so, and my career choice of working more with community is something that I've always enjoyed and like doing. So last year, more time of change, more time of like good change. This podcast I want to share too. So that was another kind of big shift and change in an exciting way. So yeah, I would say that all has its ebbs and flows of like, the stress and anxiety and, all of that work that comes with it, while also really leaning into the fun aspect of that because it's something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So I'll say that.
Okay.
That's where I'll leave it.
Cool.
Okay.
I like that.
What about you? What's 2023 for you?
Well, I'd say last year, if we're speaking about career, I was in a dead-end job.
Fair.
And I was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
At that space. But things personally were fine. I felt like starting the podcast was a good change in the day-to-day and whatnot. And then compared to this year, a lot has happened. And I think there are a lot of things that have changed, like my career,
Fair.
that have made me actually a little bit more positive and happy.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
We'll always take a positive change.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
So that's great. Thank you. I brought that up because that's probably going to be the happiest moment of this episode.
Oh, good.
Because last year about this time, I talked about the Trail of Tears.
Oh, you did.
So it is that time of year. It is that month where we get a whole month for Native American Heritage Month, Indigenous People Heritage Month. And so this year, I'm going to ask you, what do you know about the Wounded Knee Massacre?
Ooh, that sounds so familiar. Is that the iconic picture of like the Tower of Bones? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like buffalo. I think it's like buffalo skull.
Oh. No, I know what you're talking about, though.
Not this. That doesn't come from this.
No.
Then you have to refresh my memory. I know that we reviewed this probably many points in school, but yeah.
No, that picture of buffalo, I think, was just a depiction of how overhunted the bison were of the plains. And just being like, we killed all these bison, ha-ha, yee-haw, kind of thing.
Ah, got it. Okay. That wasn't like attached to something in particular. I mean, yes, no, it has a significance. Yes. Yes. It's attached to something within history, but not like in a battle
specifically
or
yeah. Well, we are going to time travel back to another dark time of American history. We're going back to 1890. No, we can do the doodle.
Okay,
it's fine.
Ooh, dark history.
We gotta try to lighten it up a little bit. So we're going back to 1890. United States' industry is booming, producing twice as much as Britain. Its military is barely a fraction of what it is today. There wasn't really a need for it at the time.
Sure.
Corrugated cardboard is invented. Idaho
Thank
and
God.
Wyoming are added to the state's lists. Colonel Sanders, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Robert Ripley are born. Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not.
That Robert Ripley?
That Robert Ripley.
That's crazy.
Yeah, also wild that those three were born in 1890.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, Colonel Sanders of KFC.
Right.
Obviously.
And obviously, I think more popular than Eisenhower.
I feel like more well known.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Fair.
And at the tail end of that year of 1890, members of that tiny U.S. military receive medals of honor for committing one of the most heinous war crimes of modern history. I'm calling it a war crime, even though war crimes weren't fully defined until the Geneva Convention of 1949.
Yes.
Get off my back.
Get off my back.
So, the Battle of Wounded Knee, or more commonly and properly known as the Wounded Knee Massacre,
Yes.
happened on December 29th, 1890, near Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota,
Okay.
on the Lakota Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Which is still there today.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
What happened here was that nearly 300 Lakota people were murdered by the United States Army as part of their Pine Ridge campaign.
Jesus.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
There are... I don't want to get into this. First off, I'm going to explain what is a ghost dance,
Okay.
since that is kind of at the center of this story.
Oh, okay.
So in the simplest terms of a complex subject matter, the ghost dance was a religious ceremony that incorporated a circle dance. Circle dance being a circular group dance,
Sure.
that is usually led by an individual, either in ceremony or a social setting.
Got it.
But a ghost dance is a specific kind of circle dance. So what differed the ghost dance from other circle dances was that this one was supposed to end colonial expansion.
Oh.
On January 1st, 1889, Wovoka had a vision during a solar eclipse.
Okay.
Now, Wovoka was what some would call a prophet, but many others would call a spiritual leader of the northern Paiute people that inhabited land stretching from modern-day Oregon, California, Idaho, and Nevada.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, Wovoka said that he saw God, and God told him to pass along a message of peace, honesty, and clean living. He showed Wovoka visions of his ancestors living a beautiful life on beautiful land filled with all of their needs and wants. God told Wovoka to tell his people and spread the word to other nations that the people must work, don't steal or lie, love each other and don't fight, forget the old practices of war, and forget the traditional practices of hurting oneself when you mourn the dead. God also instructed Wovoka to perform a 5-day dance every 6 weeks and, quote, make a feast at the dance and have food that everybody may eat, end quote. Now, if all of these instructions were followed, then the natives would be united with their ancestors in the other world in God's presence, and they would never have to fear sickness, disease, or old age again.
Wow.
Pretty sweet deal.
That's what to say. I'm in.
Yeah.
Hands shook.
Obviously, Wovoka's eager to follow God's instructions and passed along his message to every native of the West, hoping that if every last one of the people danced and committed to the Creator's plan, that it would hasten the event that he had planned. Capital he.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Thank you.
And I want to clarify something that might confuse some people, that like why I'm saying God. Colonialism, first and foremost.
Yeah.
But from my knowledge, and I would love to be corrected here, but as far back as I know, as I've read as well, there's always been like the Creator.
Okay.
Kind of one singular, all-powerful being.
Okay.
That was kind of later called God because of colonialism, but the Creator had several different names depending on what nation you were part of, what culture you were part of.
Okay.
I realize I'm looking more at the camera to like talk to the people, and I don't need to
Talk to the people. Yes. Say hello.
So like the creator had a couple different names depending on where you were from.
Yeah.
Because of colonialism, God was a common name and became kind of a popular focus for this religion.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of different nations believed like, oh, there's spirits in everything and everyone. Yeah. And whatnot. But there was an ultimate creator. So just to clarify, colonialism made it God. We're here now.
Got it. But you mean more so in a general of like a creator being.
Yes. Yes. So, Wovoka, eager to follow God's instructions.
Love it.
All the evil would be swept away, leaving the land filled with food, love, and faith. So this is going to be great.
Oh my God, what kind of Eden are we stepping into?
Right? So, Wovoka does also claim, too, that the white people would be able to stay in the East. It wasn't just necessarily like eradicating all the white people. It was just kind of like, we're going to have peace now. We're going to have our land where we're at now, essentially.
Right.
There's going to be no more expansion.
Sure.
President Harrison, who was president at the time, would be, quote, God's deputy in the East, end quote, while Wovoka would be in charge of the West.
He got a whole thing. Dang.
Supposedly.
Bountiful. No more old age. No sickness.
Wovoka's king.
Well, yeah, it was like Wovoka got the real good end of this bargain. Mm-hmm.
So word spread quickly of this massive religious ceremony that was supposed to change the world. At first, it was called, quote, dance in a circle, end quote. Mm-hmm. But the European Americans first heard of this ceremony by way of the Lakota people, who called it spirit dance, which in turn got translated to ghost dance.
Okay, heard.
So in summary, ghost dance is a ceremony to bring prosperity to the native folk and reunite them with their ancestors.
Love it.
Some interpret it that as bring them back from the dead or from the other world mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Instead of like just being reunited in one world. So like instead of going to the other world, to the afterlife to be reunited with them, they would just be here among the living.
Oh, like just roam around as like spirits?
I guess.
Okay. Like permanently?
Hopefully. In this bountiful land where you don't need or want anything kind of a situation.
Yeah, that's fair.
So while things didn't pan out according to the prophecy, as Wovoka had hoped, as we all know now, I couldn't help but thinking in kind of like a twisted way, one could say that some were indeed reunited with their ancestors in God's presence. Oh. So like part of that prophecy came true in a terrible sense.
Yeah.
Because they died, if you haven't caught that.
Thank you for explaining that one.
Yeah. You know, I don't want anyone guessing what I'm meaning.
Right. We've been down that path before.
So that's the ghost dance. Now we're going to get into the story of the massacre itself.
Okay.
And this story starts off like every other story of Western expansion in U.S. history. Treaties broken, bison herds and other food sources ground down to near extinction, and unrightful land seizures.
Got it.
The U.S. government was once again moving the Lakota people from their new territory that they were already moved to once before, further west, away from white civilization, which of course caused unrest on the reservations. Anytime you're being displaced, you're going to get a little PO'd.
Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. Right.
So word of Wovoka's ghost dance prophecy was spreading among the people.
Okay.
That by performing this solemn dance, a slow, silent shuffle led by a single drum beat, the ancestors would lead them to good hunting grounds where all of the bison herds returned, and the ancestors would return to Earth. A new age of peace would be upon the people, and the white invaders would disappear from the native lands.
Love it.
Again, great deal.
Yeah.
Special ghost dance shirts were being made for the people to wear during the ceremony. These were called ghost shirts.
Nice.
Classically.
As you say.
Yeah, and they were to be worn by the dancers for the ceremony. And what's weird, though, is like a rumor spread that these shirts would protect those who wore them from bullets, which was obviously and ultimately not true.
Right.
I don't know where, like, it's not really remarked where that rumor started or like what was going on. I think people were just so eager and excited about this prophecy. And, you know, like when you play the game Telephone, like things get twisted.
Yeah.
You're spreading this word across half of a country to many people speaking different languages. So things are going to be lost in translation. But somehow Bulletproof came up.
Well, first of all, the fact that we're even at that point. But, to your point, I think it's like a hyperbole that just kind of gets, for some reason, rooted in truth.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I get that.
So there's that rumor going around.
Naturally.
Some also believed that this ceremony would cause a great earthquake and flood that would destroy all of the white people. So our original prophecy was like, no, we're going to live in peace. There's going to be no more war.
Right.
No more disease. We're not going to need or want for anything. White people are still going to have their shit in the East.
Right.
We're all going to be doing our thing in the West. It's going to be great. But then some members of the Sioux Nation like, nah, this is going to fucking kill everyone. Let's go. Like, let's do it.
So some were more bitter than others.
Right, yeah. Especially like the massive Sioux Nation who have been fighting white people for fucking ever at this point. Like, and getting displaced over and over and over again. It's like, no, fuck these people. We're going to do this so they all die in earthquake and flood. Ha 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 ha.
Got them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, people are excited.
Like, I don't know Noah's Ark, but yeah.
Right. They tried to teach me that, but I was like, fuck this.
Fuck this.
So, as word and rumors spread, hope also spread among the people that life would return to how it once was. Fear that their way of life was going to be eradicated really ignited a desire to perform the ghost dance. They were worried about all the bison being almost extinct, all of their fertile farmland and whatnot. That's all gone, and they just want that back. And that was all described being returned to them through this prophecy, and it was described by the creator through WDYK. So the native folk, excited by this chance, a small chance of hope, are gathering to perform the ceremony. And like any other time people of color try to gather, white people get nervous.
So well put.
It's true.
So well put. White people get nervous. Oh, it's true.
So they believed, the white people believed that the natives were gathering for some kind of planned armed attack. Also, so fucking classic.
Of course.
History repeats itself over and over again.
Embedded in, in the culture.
So to send a message, maybe, or perhaps just to try and take the wind out of the sail of this ghost dance stuff, this spooky ghost dance stuff, the U.S. government decided to arrest some of the local leaders, or to use their words, the chiefs. They wanted to arrest some of the chiefs.
Sure.
So on December 15th, 1890, Sitting Bull was murdered by the Indian Agency policemen that went to his home to arrest him.
I do remember that. Okay.
Tensions were high in this Lakota village, as they did not want to see Sitting Bull unrightfully arrested. They were just went and was like, we're going to arrest you. No cause, of course.
Of course.
Classic.
Yeah.
History, man.
Wild.
So, a Lakota shot the police lieutenant with his rifle, who was trying to arrest Sitting Bull, to which the lieutenant fired his revolver into the chest of Sitting Bull. Another police officer shot Sitting Bull in the head.
Oh my God. Sitting Bull didn't even do anything. And they're like, get that one.
Yeah, so like the story expanded. I kind of shortened the story a lot.
Okay.
But the story expanded is that like a fuck ton of police officers from the Indian agency came to arrest Sitting Bull and like almost like surrounded his house. Sitting Bull was just hanging out in his house. And with his wife and kid, and the lieutenant was like, hey man, you gotta go, you're under arrest. And Sitting Bull was like, no, and like delayed, made as much noise as possible to make aware of the situation to the rest of the Lakota people in the village. And that's when the Lakota people like came out of their homes and was like, what the fuck's going on, and like surrounded the cops. And so like that's kind of like the shit that happened.
Yeah.
And then eventually the rifle goes off, shoots the lieutenant. Lieutenant shoots Sitting Bull. Another guy shoots Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull dies.
Jesus. Did any of the cops die?
No.
Of course not.
Not that I know of. They might have, but I don't remember that full part of the story. But I think no.
I just also imagine like the house and then the circle of cops and then the circle of Lakota and then the circle of cops and then it just like keeps on getting bigger.
Exactly. So after Sitting Bull's death, people were understandably afraid.
Yeah.
And 200 members of his village left to join up with Chief Spotted Elk, who then later left to join the others at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Okay.
So everyone's kind of moving to one central spot, or trying to do this, to do the ghost dance. So on his slow journey to Pine Ridge, Spotted Elk acquired about 150 more followers.
Oh, wow.
So not everyone left with him to continue on his journey, but like others joined him to continue on to perform the ceremony. Mm-hmm. They were unfortunately intercepted by a 7th Cavalry detachment of the U.S. Army, who were to escort the natives about 5 miles from where they were and instructed them to make camp there at Wounded Knee Creek. This is where things get worse. So the Lakota weren't disarmed right away. They still had the weapons and all their belongings that they brought with them on this journey.
Sure.
Major Whitside of the 7th Cavalry wanted to have the Lakota surrender their weapons right away, but took the advice of his scout and interpreter, a half Lakota named John Shangro, that disarming these people would only lead to violence. Smart man.
Yes.
We'll see what happens later.
Right. I was like, I mean, we're going to get there anyway, but yeah.
We all know where this is going.
Right.
It's not called the Wounded Knee Massacre for nothing. So by the evening of December 28th, 1890, the rest of the 7th Cavalry arrived, and the 500 troopers surrounded the camp of the 350 Lakota people, which was made up of 120 men and 230 women and children.
Wow. Okay.
So in addition, so not a lot of like Lakota warriors, essentially.
Sure.
Only a handful. Mm-hmm. So in addition to the 500 U.S. military members surrounding the Lakota camp, 4 rapid-fire M1875 or M1875 mountain guns were pointed at the camp.
Oh, my God.
Mountain guns, for those of you who don't know, are essentially little cannons that can be easily disassembled for ease of transport in areas like mountains when the roads aren't that great. This specific mountain gun was, quote, the first original breech-loading gun in the U.S. Army, end quote, and wound up replacing the M1841 mountain howitzer. Okay. Breech-loading guns. This is important. Okay. Kind of. Okay. Breech loading is the capability of loading ammunition in the back of the weapon rather than muzzle loading like the early musket. So instead of having to go in front of the cannon and like shove shit down the barrel, you're just able to open up the back, put your ammunition in, close it, and fire it off. Yeah. This allows for faster reloading times and better better fitting ammunition, which greatly increased power, range, and accuracy.
Sure.
So you have 4 fast as shit for the time, firing cannons pointed directly at a camp that has mostly women and children in it.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the sun rises on December 29th, 1890, and Colonel Forsyth of the 7th Cavalry orders the surrender of weapons and immediate removal of the Lakota to nearby trains. Say, give me your weapons, don't even pack your shit, move out, we're putting you on trains to displace you elsewhere.
Okay.
He claimed that this was a, quote, zone of military operations, end quote. So they had to scoot.
Of course.
Right. So 38 rifles were confiscated after the initial search of the Lakota camp, and more were taken from Lakota men themselves that just like had them slung on their shoulder and whatnot.
Sure.
A medicine man named Yellowbird tried to calm those that were becoming agitated by the search being carried out by the U.S. soldiers. He was like, hey, guys, this sucks, I know. Chill out a little bit.
Right.
Come on. This is not going to end well.
Right.
He even began to perform the ghost dance to try to like kind of calm everyone down, to like maybe get people's hopes back up and whatnot.
Yeah.
But like kind of detrimental to the whole situation was that he was also further spreading the idea that their ghost shirts were bulletproof. which isn't great.
Yeah. Well, and like you're trying to do it as a means of de-escalation, but it's actually escalating because you're ramping in energy. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So one Lakota known as Black Coyote refused to surrender his rifle. He happened to be deaf and didn't speak any English. So there was no way for him to understand the orders that the cavalry was giving him.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know what the fuck you're saying. Like, I see your mouth moving. I can't hear you. I can't understand your language.
Right.
So another Lakota tried to like step in and interpret and whatnot, and told the soldier to stop and tried to explain the situation, that he's deaf. He doesn't understand you. Stop.
Yeah.
But was unsuccessful. So two different soldiers come up from behind Black Coyote and seize him. And during the struggle, his rifle goes off. At the same time, Yellowbird, doing his thing with the ghost dance, throws some dust in the air. And 5 young Lakota men threw aside some blankets that were concealing their rifles and shot at the soldiers of the 7th Cavalry.
Oh my God.
From there, only chaos and murder ensued.
Right. That feels so coordinated. Like, it clearly wasn't.
Right.
It just is like...
Everything kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of this is asterisked, which I don't think is a real word, but whatever.
Sure.
With allegedly in notes and whatnot, because it's chaotic. History gets whitewashed.
Of course.
There are only so many first-hand notes of what actually happened. And
totally.
Like, in that moment, how can you be sure of exactly what happened?
Right. Unless you're an outside observer. Right.
Yeah. So, like I said, everything's kind of asterisked with allegedly, especially when it comes to the start of this massacre. Some claimed that Black Coyote wasn't deaf. He was just quote, a crazy man, a young man of very bad influence, and in fact, a nobody, end quote.
Oh my God.
And that was a native person saying that, so.
They're like, we actually fucking hate Black Coyote. Yeah. We have this thing called a burn book, and Black Coyote is in it. Yeah.
Though modern historians do claim that Black Coyote was deaf and his rifle did go off, but there was no record of it had actually hit, like if the bullet hit anyone.
Sure. I honestly didn't assume that it hit anyone.
Right. It just like went off in the air or whatever, you know? My personal little gripe in my research of this was that this is the middle of winter in South Dakota. Where did Yellowbird find some dust to throw up in the air? Like, unless like he brought some from home or like used ash from the fire, but like all you're getting is snow. There are pictures of this, and it's like the whole prairie is just covered in snow. So like,
so maybe dust is really like a powdering of snow. Maybe.
We'll never know.
Or maybe he's got like a pocket full of...
Just pocket sand.
Yeah.
So, if you read more into this or as you're listening to these episodes, everything's kind of like allegedly.
Fair.
But anyway. So at first, all of the firing was at close range. Obviously, all of the weapons were... kind of confiscated, and everyone was in the camp trying to get rid of those weapons, or at least the soldiers were. So it's very close quarters.
Yeah,
and because of this, half the Lakota men were killed or wounded even before they had a chance to rearm themselves or fire the weapon they had in their hand.
Oh my God!
So this close quarters fighting lasted only a few minutes, and in those few minutes, the remaining Lakota, mostly women and children, like I mentioned earlier, were trying to run for safety. The soldiers wound up turning those mountain guns, those fast reloading, powerful mountain guns, on the teepee camp where the women and children were, and they opened fire.
Oh my God.
The few Lakota that were actually able to flee the camp were hunted down by soldiers on horseback for some miles across the prairie.
For what purpose?
Bloodshed.
Yeah.
Other soldiers found out and finished the wounded. The officers in this situation totally lost control, and their soldiers were out for blood, obviously. And in less than an hour, at least 150 Lakota were killed, and 50 had been wounded. By the end of it all, it is estimated that 300 of the original 350 were killed or wounded. Among them was Spotted Elk and Black Coyote. Now, there are some reports that stated 51 survivors of the massacre were loaded onto wagons and taken away. And like it's kind of iffy is the final count is a little iffy. The U.S. Army only lost 25 dead. But like the final numbers, like I've been trying to say, of the Lakota casualties are hard to nail down exactly, since there was a 3-day blizzard, essentially like right after, that covered up many of the bodies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm going to read 2 different accounts, one from a Lakota person and one from a member of the 7th Cavalry.
I can't wait.
American Horse of the Oglala Lakota said, quote, "There was a woman with an infant in her arms who was killed as she almost touched the flag of truce. A mother was shot with her infant. The child, not knowing that its mother was dead, was still nursing. The women, as they were fleeing with their babies, were killed together, shot right through. And after most of all of them had been killed, a cry was made that all those who were not killed or wounded should come forth and they would be safe. Little boys came out of their places of refuge, and as soon as they came in sight, a number of soldiers surrounded them and butchered them there." End quote.
My God.
Edward S. Godfrey, captain of the Company D of the 7th Cavalry, recalled the following, quote, "I know the men did not aim deliberately, and they were greatly excited. I don't believe they saw their sights of their rifles. They fired rapidly, but it seemed to me only a few seconds till there was not a living thing before us. Warriors, squaws, children, ponies, and dogs went down before that unaimed fire." End quote.
So one is saying it's deliberate, the other is saying it just was chaos.
Yeah. American Horse was like saying they were just out for blood, slaughtering. Edward was just saying that they were kind of like in a blood feud state of just red over their eyes, ready to fire at whatever, not even aiming their weapons to shoot properly. They were just opening fire. So after the blizzard, after the 3-day blizzard, the military hired civilians to gather and place the dead in a mass grave on a hill where one of those mountain guns was located.
Jesus.
And it is potentially that they didn't find all the bodies because of the blizzard, but that's where we're at with that. Colonel Forsyth was relieved of his command, but later reinstated by the Secretary of War. While no formal court-martial took place, through a court of inquiry testimony, it was provided. There was testimony that was provided that indicated the troops tried to avoid non-combatant casualties.
Got it.
They're like, we did our best to not shoot the women and children. We just lined them up and shot them.
Right. I was like, we did our best, and yet all of them somehow died?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just, turned our massive cannons onto where they were sleeping. It's fine. Jeez. So on top of all of that, 19 Medals of Honor were awarded specifically for service at Wounded Knee. More were awarded for the entire Pine Ridge campaign, but 19 specifically for the actions at Wounded Knee.
The actions of what? Killing everyone?
Exactly. Multiple attempts have been made to have those revoked, as they tarnished the acts of those who rightfully earned the Medal of Honor through acts of bravery and heroism, not massacre.
Right.
These attempts have unfortunately failed in Congress and the Senate, as it was at the time the president who awarded these medals. So it's not the right of the legislative branch to remove them.
So the president has to remove them.
The president has to remove them.
Ooh.
As of 2024, the Secretary of Defense announced a joint DOD and DOI, Department of Interior and Department of Defense, review to look into revoking the Wounded Knee Medals of Honor.
Okay. Yeah.
Something's moving.
I mean, but at the same time, no matter what, the president still has to sign off on it.
Right. So vote. And maybe someone will do something.
Correct. Right. Yes.
I know Joe recently went and apologized for specific actions of the U.S., which is a great first step, something that hasn't been done ever, really.
Yeah.
So that's nice. So maybe, next year something will happen. I'll let you know.
Yeah, that was a crazy press conference, but
very much
for other
so.
different reasons.
Yes.
Yes.
So then Wounded Knee was declared a U.S. National Historic Landmark in 1965 and was listed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in 1966. And that is all there is to say about, well, I mean, there's a lot more to say about it, but that's all I'm going to say about the Wounded Knee Massacre.
Well, yeah, I think it's one of those things where, of course, time and time again, it's here's two depictions. What do you really think happened here? You know what I mean? And I'm sure that there is some gray area in the middle. You know what I mean? But I'm just like, there's no way that to kill 350 people with guns at that time, to kill 350 people today with our weaponry.
People.
Oh, 300. Please. Excuse me. That's right. The 50 that survived. To kill 300 people today obviously could happen within minutes.
Yeah.
Right? But back then, with the way that you needed to load rifles, the way that all of these things happen, like, you get to a point where whether you're in a blood feud state or not, like, that takes time.
Yeah.
So, like, at some point, you're just being deliberate.
Right.
You're not just, like, if I shot a couple of people because I was just in this, like, panic and fear, sure, not excusing it, but just saying, like,
right.
I get it.
Yeah.
But because how many soldiers were there again?
500.
500. I mean, just like, that's just insane to me. So then every single soldier basically shot their rifle. Right. That's what you're telling me? Like, that's insane. So, yeah, I mean, also 500 people for this. It's bananas.
Right.
That's a lot of people.
For a camp that's 2/3 women and children.
Women and children, right. 500?
Yeah.
You didn't have to use them somewhere else?
Right.
Don't you have a whole restoration happening in the South?
Exactly. I mean, it's like, because like the U.S. military wasn't that big at that time either. Like, it wasn't what it is today at all by any means. Like I said at the beginning of this, it wasn't even a fraction of what the military is today. So, like, I don't know. It's a large amount of troops for nothing. Right. And what's interesting though is, like, this is obviously still a wound in the Native people's hearts.
Absolutely.
And something that I might talk about later, or maybe next year, who knows, is that this actually led to an occupation of Wounded Knee by people of, like, descendants of survivors and whatnot later in, I want to say sometime between the 60s and 80s. I know that's a broad time frame, but I don't remember the exact dates of it. But there was a whole nother incident there of protesters and of people being like, this is bullshit. Why aren't we talking more about this? Why do we still have the Medal of Honor? What the fuck's going on?
Totally.
And so that's a really interesting thing to learn about and read about as well, is how the crimes of the past are still affecting the folks of today.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that makes sense for that time period. Like, yes, that's a 20-year range we've put, but it's coming out of the civil rights movement. There's a lot of call to action surrounding that. So that absolutely makes sense.
It looks like it was 1973, so still a perfect time.
Yeah.
February 1973. And just from this brief Google under the U.S. Marshal Service.gov, the incident began in February 1973 and represented the longest civil disorder in the history of the Marshal's Service.
Oh, wow.
So
it wasn't the fist operation?
No. It was, though, a 71-day occupation of the area.
71 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's definitely going to be a topic for a later time.
Yeah.
But very interesting, very sad topic, but like I said, interesting in the way of how it's still affecting the community today.
Absolutely. And, I think we spoke about this last time, but it's always, while it is heart-wrenching to speak to things of this nature, we've done a few massacres before and things like that, it's still very important to get a story out there to understand, contextually what happened and move beyond so that we can learn from it. You know what I mean?
100%. So, and like we've made a couple jokes throughout this just because of history repeating itself in like white people being nervous about people of color gathering, wanting to take away their right to do religious stuff, like all this stuff that keeps on repeating and repeating. And if you learn about history, all the bad parts about history, and not just the whitewashed versions, you understand why we're all pissed off today.
Right. Well, exactly. And what that calls to the Biden conference of saying like,
Yeah.
and the disruption of how can you stand here and apologize for a genocide when you're in the middle of one? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like, yeah, maybe, we only can hope that one day we'll learn from from our
We're
mistakes.
trying to apologize for one thing at a time, I guess.
Right. Wild. But thanks, Steph. Thanks
No.
for taking us through that. I'm waiting for the, the positive side of some of these things too.
Well, so are the rest of them.
Yeah, fair.
I don't know. Reservation Dogs won an Emmy, so I guess that's positive.
That's true. What was the Emmy for? Was it writing?
It looks like it was for Outstanding Comedy Series and Lead Actor in a Comedy Series.
Oh, that's awesome.
And maybe one of those is a nomination. The other one's an award. I know one of them. Hold on. Let me actually look it up. Oh, I guess it was just nominated.
Oh, no wins?
Yeah. Well,
They're nominated.
they're nominated. Yeah,
Yeah.
It got brought to the spotlight, I guess. So
That's fair.
we'll see how I edit that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so anyway, thanks everybody for listening about that sad tale.
Yes.
It's something I like to do, bring up things of that nature, especially this time of year in the month we get.
Yeah. Correct.
So thanks for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe everything that we do. You can find us everywhere at WDYK_podcast. And, send us a message, even if it's just a hey.
Yeah.
Hey, you up. Don't send us that, please. We're married.
Immediately revoked.
Thanks for listening. Thanks, Dick, for listening. And we'll catch you next week.
Sounds good. Bye, Devin.
Bye.